Hello everyone, welcome to Political Science 198, and this is actually the first time I'm recording, and this should be a very short video. I want to promise on that. So before I start, I want to make sure that you are following everything. So basically this week you need to work on two things. The first thing is your research question, and the second thing is finding an electoral race, a competitive one that you want to follow and write your assignment on the campaign. So I'm going to create two discussion forums for both of these so that we can actually work on the research question and your race as well. And I'm going to give feedback constantly as you post your ideas on those forums. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about finding a good research question, good and interesting research question. So let's start with that because it's quite important to find and start with a very good question. So basically you need to find a research question. Why is the case? Because first of all, topics are too broad to work on. This is why I had, for instance, have very difficult time when I was thinking about my dissertation topic during my PhD years, because I was finding very broad topics, and my advisor was always telling me that it's not necessarily doable. And this is why I think finding a research question is quite important to narrow down your focus. So you need a manageable challenge. This is number one. Number two is a question links you to a controversy and allows you to become engaged in the scholarly and policy debate. So basically, most probably there will be a big debate waiting for you the moment you choose your research question, which it's either in the literature or it's in the policy. So basically finding those ideas being contested and examining some information to evaluate the veracity of these claims. And third, a question gives you the reason to write, right? It's quite simple. So if you ask a question, you need to answer that question, right? So this is why it is important to find a research question from the beginning. So another way to find inspiration for a topic, right? So this is something very important, to find inspiration for a research, because if you lose your inspiration or if you lose your motivation, then you stop working on it. And this is the worst thing can happen to a researcher. This is why it is very important to find a topic that you are very motivated. And this is very important. This is why I think you need to find something personal. So it doesn't mean that it should be about your private life. Of course it's not. But it should be something that you care about. It should be something, for instance, some of you already posted on the forum about introducing yourself. So some of you already wrote about racial injustice, right? So if it is very important, and I bet it is very important, especially nowadays in this country. So if it is your topic, then you can actually get that topic, take that topic as a general, broad topic, and then you can narrow it. Then you need to ask, of course, further questions. Can be local issues. So most of you are from Staten Island or maybe south of Brooklyn. So if you think some of the topics are very important for the local politics, then you can definitely stick to those topics. And other questions that you can ask yourself. So why you choose your major, right? Maybe the answer to that question can actually lead you to find a research question. What your extracurricular activities are. So those are also sometimes can lead you good questions. Your career aspirations and your favorite classes, your personal concerns. So the current events and debates. So elections, we are in an election year. So if you want to do a research on voting behavior, then maybe that's what you want to write about your research. So basically, number one, the first criteria for finding a research question is it needs to be important and interesting for you. So second one is it needs to be important. So your research also needs to be important because if you don't have an answer to the question, so what? Because people are going to ask that question. The moment you start to explain your research, people are going to ask you, so what? So if you don't have a good answer to that question, then it might be the case that actually your research question is not the right one. So you need to have a good answer to that question, so what question. So your research also needs to be important. So one way to figure out whether your research is important or not is to look at the literature. This is why it is so important starting right now to look at the academic writing, academic scholarship about your research. And please do not start looking at Google, rather start with the academic online database. So academic search, Premier, JSTOR, and I think the best way to start is actually Google Scholar. So rather than looking at Google by itself, of course, if you are starting from the scratch, please go with the Google. But then if you start to develop a more fine argument about your research topic, then I think it is very good to go with the Google Scholar after that point. So it needs to be short. So a research question cannot be a paragraph. It needs to be one single sentence. That's very important. It needs to be direct. So it should not necessarily have different positives and negatives and meaning. So it needs to be direct and very simple. Simple is beautiful. This is our motto when it comes to research question. It needs to be doable, because let's realize we are in a semester, just one semester long. So you don't necessarily have years to do research on this. And optional one is puzzling. So I think puzzles are very important things to figure out. Finding a puzzle typically means linking something empirical with your issue or concept of interest. So most of the time it has some surprising empirics. So for instance, one of the puzzles that just comes to my mind is when you look at the advanced, developed, industrialized countries in the world, right? Especially Western European countries, and there are countries like Anglo-Saxon tradition, like Canada, US, and then Australia, New Zealand. So when you compare these countries, you figure out that actually when it comes to welfare policies, the US is probably always at the very least, at the very end of the list. So then, of course, this is puzzling, right? You can ask the question why the US does not necessarily give much to its citizens compared to other European countries. There should be a reason for that. That's a good question, and you can actually make a good argument to answer that question. But of course, this is just an example. So starting words of your questions. So normally questions, like research questions, should not, of course, there might be some exceptions, but they should not start with who, where, when, because these questions you can answer very easily. These are more journalistic questions, but your questions rather should start with question words like why, how, to what extent, or under what conditions. So these are quite important. And another thing you need to avoid, this is very important, you should not have should or ought questions, because we are actually doing a research from a quite objective perspective. Of course, we all have our positions, and you definitely will take a position in your research, we will make an argument, but we'll use empirical evidence rather than common sense to support those. So it is better not to ask should or ought questions. We ask more objective questions. This is very, very important. So avoid seeking to predict the future. That's another thing. So in the past, I have so many students asking questions like, who will win 2020 presidential elections? This is not a good research question, because we still don't have the elections yet. So you can only analyze the elections. You can always ask why either Donald Trump or Joe Biden won the election, right? After the elections. This is a question, but you cannot ask a question about the future, especially something still not happened yet. So this is quite important to mention. So I'm looking at my notes whether I forget anything after this point. I think this is it. And maybe finally I can just say there are different types of research questions you can ask, like theory, advancing, public policy, conceptual. We can definitely talk about those as well. But I think we are almost 10 minutes, so I don't want to talk more and make this boring. So let's keep it short. So please email me if you have any questions, and please get active as soon as possible for the class, because otherwise you are going to be quite late for almost all the assignments. So please get active as soon as possible. So I'll see you all tomorrow during our time, like at 11, and we'll have 1 hour session. So have a nice day.